Good evening again, and welcome to the One Take Livecast. I'm Jax, and I'm going to be joined by Julian Shaw Taylor, producer, remixer, songwriter, singer, a man of many talents. He'll be joining us from Pasadena, California, and we're very grateful to have him on the show while being so far away across the pond. So let's invite the... Oh, just wait for him to join us.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How is it over there in Pasadena?
How is it? It is fine. It is sunny as always. We never get anything other than beautiful, bright sun. Just trying to get this situated.
No, it's perfect. You're perfect and everything. First of all, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. What a pleasure.
Absolutely. And, this is going to be great, especially talking about all your, you've got a long list of stuff.
There is a long list of stuff. Yeah, I do a lot of different things.
Obviously, originally from Leeds, and obviously you're a self-taught musician and everything, and you studied at York University, and you just basically wanted this like path in music. But what sort of got it all live and kicking for you?
I don't really understand the question. I was at Durham Cathedral Choir School, which was where my first sort of experience in music. I was actually classically trained, not self-taught. But
sorry, I meant instruments.
Well, classically trained on instruments.
Oh, yeah.
I trained on piano, church organ, violin, trumpet, and then I taught myself guitar. So that's maybe where you get that from. And drums and bass and stuff, and synths and all that. But sort of hybrid.
Yeah. So obviously you've always loved music. It's been part of your life for very long. But what sort of decided you wanted to make a career out of it?
I think it was always. I mean, I listened to Prince. I think that was my big inspiration. Prince was the big, turning point. I mean, I was at Durham Cathedral Choir School, which was, it's sacred music and very traditional. Obviously, a lot of, classically inspired stuff, I guess. And then I heard Prince, and it just blew my mind. I was like, what is this stuff? Is like this weird American guy. Also, and there's a racial component to it, which is, I don't want to be, don't want this to sound weird, but I'd never seen a black dude before living up in the north of England when I was there. And it was this strange, weird, wonderful music made by this completely different looking dude. And that was mind blowing for me. And I mean, especially the cover of his album, he sort of, looks very, it's very sexual. It's like a weird thing as well. It's totally different than the cathedral.
The thing about Prince is he's very authentic, very unique. So that's the good thing about his albums and a sort of his mystiqueness.
Yeah, I mean, you get. I think there's a psychological hole that you get into when you're sort of stuck in the British society, right? I mean, certainly, in Durham, it's north of England, and quite far north, and it's very traditional and very conservative, right? Or was when I was growing up there. And suddenly your mind is sort of opened by something different. I mean, I'm sure in the early 70s, Bowie would have done that for people, but that was a little bit before my era. Prince was my entry into that, possibilities and new, unusual things, and expression that wasn't written down on the page. It's like, I think the song that really blew my mind open first was Paisley Park, because it was a bit like the Beatles, and then If I Was Your Girlfriend, because If I Was Your Girlfriend lyrically was what is going on here. I didn't really understand what it was about. And musically, I mean, do you know the song If I Was Your Girlfriend?
Yeah, vaguely. I mean, I haven't listened to Prince for a week or so, but when I try and remember a song, if I hear the music, I'll be like, oh, it's that one. But remembering names sometimes for me is like, trying to remember what I had for breakfast.
You got it. I haven't had my breakfast yet, so I relate. But yeah, I mean, it was just basically it's a bass line and a whole load of stack harmonies and some weird synths that don't make any sense, and then it sort of flows into this other space. Like as a trained musician, it doesn't make any sense, and
Mm.
so I was intrigued by that. It's like, a lot of people travel into jazz or they travel into classical music like serialism, like Schoenberg or Stockhausen, and that was never appealing to me. It felt a bit precious. Whereas Prince was doing this incredibly strange, artistic, baffling music that was on his own terms. And it really just made me go, I want to do that. I want to do that. I can sing, I can play all these instruments, but I want to do something that nobody else has ever thought of before. Because if you're raised in the classical tradition, it's like it's a series of traditions. And then when you get past a certain point, like you've got the Debussy and Satie and all these people, then you go straight to John Cage and Schoenberg and Stockhausen, who are unlistenable. I mean, unless you're really into it, it's super unlistenable. It's like it's serialism, or, John Cage famously did a piece which was 3 minutes, 42 seconds of silence, which is interesting, but it isn't fun. Prince brought something interesting and fun there to me. So that was the point. When I bought the album Sign of the Times, I just thought, I want to move to America. I want to make bizarre, strange music that you could never envisage as a choir boy from the north of England, Does that answer the question? I'm sorry, it was a bit circuitous.
No, no, no. No, please, no apologies needed. That was a perfect answer and everything. And obviously, you moved from England to obviously California, or did you start in California, or did you start somewhere else in America before going to California?
Well, I was on tour with my old band, and we did a lot of America. Well, we did a lot of Europe, we did a lot of America, and just California is sunny. I mean, are you in Manchester?
I'm Cardiff.
Cardiff. Are you really? I'm from Bridgend.
Oh,
That's where my family's all from.
oh, nice. Nice to know a fellow dragon.
Right. Well, yeah, not really very nice. Have you been to Bridgend?
I used to live there, so
Right.
I'm not going to say anything.
Well, I don't want to disrespect Bridgend
No,
as a place, but
no.
I just worked with Michael Aston, who's from Gene Jezebel, and they are from Bridgend too. Isn't that weird? Like,
Yeah.
we're both living in LA.
Well, that's the thing about music. It has a very reaching audience. You could be hearing it from a treehouse in Soho, or you could be hearing it from a radio in Los Angeles and everything. So, like I said, it depends who you know and who you reach out to. But also, while obviously you said being classically trained and everything, but what was it like to get to become the other side of music? So not just a performer, but also producing and remixing and obviously, so all that and everything. Like there's all this playground of everything. And what did you enjoy about that mostly?
I mean, that's mostly what I do, to be honest. I much prefer the creative side of things. I mean, I certainly, when somebody gives me a remix to do, I don't want to listen to the original song. I want to make it completely from scratch, new, because that's interesting to me. Like, I want to do something that's entirely my own. I want to carry that Prince light, where he just took something and did something so unusual and didn't want to follow a trend. And it works against you sometimes, honestly. I mean, if you don't sit within an easily categorizable pigeonhole, then it's really difficult to get radio play. I had a really interesting back and forth with Eddie Temple Morris. Do you know Eddie Temple Morris? Yeah,
Vaguely.
he was a friend back in the day when I was living in London, and he told me, you've got to make a choice. You've got to decide whether you're Coldplay or whether you're Sonic Youth, because all the stuff that I was sending him, he couldn't program on his show because it was too mainstream sounding. And then he couldn't give it to the mainstream because it was too sort of avant-garde and arty sounding. So you know, sometimes it's best if you just say, hey, I'm a goth, and then make goth music. You know, I noticed you interviewed Rachel Stamp, who I love dearly, and
Oh,
big
yeah.
those guys. And when I arrived in London, I had a band that was a bit similar to Rachel Stamp in the sense that we were quite fashion forward, but we did, you know, more kind of heavier Muse like music, and it just didn't fit. It's like we couldn't really play those sort of, I, 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 I guess, testosterone fueled sounds to that more Fey audience. And I love Rachel Stamp. They did it perfectly. They really nailed it. Along with, you know, who's the other one? Crispin's band, Daisy Chainsaw, like in the same bracket as Rachel Stamp, I found. We could have done that and sat in that lane, but we decided to go a bit more muscular, and it just didn't, you know, it didn't translate the same way. So what I'm doing now is because I'm the financial aspect of making music is now quite solid for me. It's like I just do what I want to do artistically, and I feel like Prince did that, but he was very commercial, so he sold his records.
No, it's really nice because, you know, there's just, I mean, it's nice to play live, it's nice to go to venues, but there is just something fun about a recording studio, be you on one side or the other. There's just something, obviously, it's a lot of hard grafting and a lot of hard work in there as well, you know, and as you're on, but it just, there's something, trying to think of the right word for this, there's something Elysian, ethereal about it.
I like
That's
it.
it.
Elysium, that's good. That's the name of my last record.
Wow.
Elysium.
Wow. I was just thinking of Elysium, but that's, yes, of course, he's here. Speaking of records, you've just, for the 50th anniversary, it is the 50th anniversary of Aladdin Sane, the great album by David Bowie, and you've just been producing all that on Forget I'm 50.
That's right, yeah. That's a lyric from Cracked Actor. Forget that I'm 50 because you just got paid. And yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. I mean, I've been working with all these people, you know, encountering them live or working with them in various contexts. And I just, because I'm on tour all the time, I spend a lot of time with 4 people. And when I come back to LA, I see my little girl who's, you know, 8 years old, and I love spending time with her, but I never see anybody. So I felt like it was time to start a project where I'd collaborate with people. So I executive produced that record, and I got all sorts of different vocalists in, and a couple of artists who did their own production as well, but I mostly produced the record. It's a very, very favorite record of mine. I did a whole bunch of live streams during the pandemic, and one of the most requested songs that people asked for me was Lady Grinning Soul from Aladdin Sane. And I realized, oh my goodness, the 50th anniversary is coming up. So why don't I just do a cover of Lady Grinning Soul? And then I just thought, well, I'll do the whole record, you know. And I asked a whole bunch of friends, and they were all up for it. So that's what happened. And we've been getting some really good response, some radio play for a couple of the songs on the record. So it's been good.
It is. I mean, the album itself, it's not just musically, but it has like an image of iconography as well, because obviously you've got, you know, the Lord himself, David Bowie, you know, with the lightning across his face, you know, showing his enigmatic personality and everything. And, you know, tracks on there. Obviously, when I heard the record Aladdin Sane for the first time as a nipper, it was mostly for radio play Dream Genie.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
Genie, because I did that with Gene Loves Jezebel, we've been getting a lot of radio play for that
yeah.
version because, you know, people know the song, people know the name Gene Loves Jezebel. So that's been the big radio play one from that album.
Yeah,
We're also getting a little bit for Cracked Actor as well, which is, yeah.
that's fun. I mean, I just surprised it. I was like, which song from the album should I promote? And for some reason, Cracked Actors worked.
Great. Great. Yeah, I mean, I really like that. I did a vocal on that version, And then we just decided, I mean, the guy who's releasing the record, who's my kind of mentor and manager, just wanted his other band that he's been working with, Something Strange. So I get to do backing vocals and guitar solo on that one.
It must, obviously, songwriting is a very important factor for yourself as well. And obviously, when you're immersing yourself with thought and process and everything, like, oh, this lyric works, that lyric works. Has there ever been any songs that have ended up on the cutting room floor but could always make a comeback for you?
Oh, hundreds, literally. I mean, I've written about 400 songs in my illustrious career. But yeah, there are hundreds which I haven't released yet. I mean, I've done probably, I'd say 50 covers that, you know, I haven't released. And then I've done about 150 originals that are good enough to be released, but they just haven't found a space on any of my albums. I've written about, I've released, how many is it? 1, 2, 7 original solo records. And then on top of that, I've got probably another 15 or 20 albums I've played on or been involved with in some way. So, but my hard drive is full of stuff. I mean, I work every day. I've been writing songs for 20 odd years. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff. And to be honest, some of them are better than some of the stuff that's been released, but they just didn't fit. I mean, I try to think.
And what about?
I try to think of an album in terms of an album. I mean, I know that's not the vogue nowadays. Spotify playlists is the thing, but I like albums from start to finish. I mean, you know, there are certain records which you cannot imagine them without the next song coming up, right? And that's really cool to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to just sometimes open the record, put it on the player, don't look what's on the tracking system, press the pin down and or put it in the cassette or, you know, how everyone plays their music, and then just know, oh, I wonder what one's next. Oh, it's this one.
Right.
You know, which is delightful. One of those albums you said is, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Hon Tatami?
Hone Tatame. It's
Correct.
Japanese. I don't know how you have that record. It's not out yet. Is it from the band?
I've just been doing a lot of research as well, and what I've, you know, asking the right questions.
Well, thank you. Yes, that's it's nearly done. I've got 10 songs that are ready to go. I've been working a lot with Mike Garson, who played piano on the original Aladdin Sane. He's played on 2 of the songs. Alan from Morrissey's band, Alan White. Carmine Rojas, who's played played bass with Bowie. And Chris Olivas, who was in Berlin for a long time, the band Berlin. Who else is on the record? David J from Bauhaus as well.
Bauhaus.
So yeah, there's a whole load of special guests on the next record. It's being co-produced with Robert Margouleff, who was Stevie Wonder and Devo's producer. So that's going to come out. I think I'm going to release it on my birthday next year, which is 1st of January. It's the follow-up.
Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's kind of a follow-up to the last record, Elysium, because I wrote some of the songs on this one as part of that project, but they didn't fit on Elysium, so I pushed the songs off. There's a couple of, I mean, basically Elysium was the story of a relationship that I have with my current girlfriend, fiance, and some of the songs just didn't fit the record, and now they fit this new record much better, which is conceptually, the reason it's called Hone Tatame is that's a Japanese phrase that means, that's not a phrase, sorry, it's 2 styles of presenting oneself to the world. So Hone, I think, means the reality of the person that you are, and Tatame means the presentation of how you want the world to see you. So it kind of makes a lot of sense in the social media world. It's like Instagram. You have this fabulous life on Instagram, but it's not the reality of your world. Your world is what you feel inside and who you are really. And so I'm kind of using it in some way. I'm trying to work on the artwork at the moment to try and reflect that. Like maybe it should be AI. Maybe it should be a really, really like an interesting photograph of me, but then an AI version sort of blended. I don't know. I'm trying to figure that one out, how to convey that.
It's nice you got the cogs turning in your head though to see what comes out, and that's very creative of thinking that. But it's amazing that you can play, you can produce, you can write. Well, it's a lot of hard work, but it's just nice to have a resume of beauty, as I call it, because music is the food of love. And play on.
Oh, sure. I mean, I see music as connection. I mean, all my life, I've been in since 7 because I went to Durham Cathedral Choir School when I was 7, and of course, every single day I'm performing music, and I'm practicing and learning that. So, my connection with people is through lyrics and through musical stuff. I mean, I'm not a terrible connector in real life either, but if you really, I told my ex-wife this, and she ignored me completely. If you really want to connect with me and understand me, listen to what I'm singing about, listen to the songs I'm writing, because that's the subconscious bubbling up. And the subconscious, to me, I've studied Jungian psychology, and I did a philosophy degree, but I also studied psychology. And all of that stuff is very important. It's self-reflexive, but I'm also trying to eradicate the ego a little bit. I mean, I have a huge ego, and you have to in my business, but I try always to understand other people's egos and to serve other people's wishes as well as my own. And when you can find the service that meshes with the self-service, then you have a perfect match. So anybody that listens to my music that understands what I'm trying to convey, then I am very honored and grateful for that. I really like that. I want the connection. And so my music is not about the art, go fuck yourself if you don't like it. It is, I am trying to connect and talk with people directly. And whether it be an individual like the last album, which was for Eva Strangelove, which is my fiance, or if it's for the world in general, then it's always an attempt, a reach out, a repair effort, a connection. That's what I'm looking for, and I feel like music is about that.
Yeah, it's very personal as well, especially to the one that is creating it. It's very personal as well. But also, obviously, you've mentioned working with these people, and obviously, as working in production, I think, obviously, there is a professionalism to keep and a calm demeanor. But has there been a lot of starstruck moments?
When I've been working with people, it's strange actually. The only person that I've ever worked with who I am starstruck by, I'm currently doing a project with Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics. And he's somebody that I've looked up to. I mean, even for just that one song, Sweet Dreams, that is a great piece of music that will, in my mind, be judged alongside, Beethoven's Fifth as a huge moment in musical history. And yes, I'm shell shocked and stunned, but I haven't actually met him in person. I have a back and forth with him on Instagram, as he's sent me stuff, but and in real life, I have FaceTime with him and all that stuff. So that's the only person, because I've worked with a lot of quite well-known artists, but I've never worked with anybody that I am absolutely in awe of. I love David J. He's wonderful. I love Carmine, is a wonderful person. I'm not starstruck by them at all. It's a very rarefied breed of people that I'm starstruck by. Because when I used to tour a lot with my old band, and I won't mention my name because I've fallen out with the guy and I can't stand him. We met all of the people. I mean, I've met everybody in the music industry who I respect or love. There's probably a couple I haven't, but I don't care. I don't want to meet people unless they want to work with me, because otherwise you're just a fan, looking from underneath, and that's pointless to me. I don't see the point. I mean, I relish, I take photographs with people just like any fan would, and I publish them because I'm excited about the fact that I'm working with David. I'm excited about the fact that I'm working with Siobhan from Bananarama or whatever I've done in the past. But I've never been starstruck in that sense. Now, if David Bowie had ever called me up, and it was very close one time I nearly was on a project with David Bowie, and it didn't happen. In fact, it's twice I was nearly doing something with David Bowie in my life, and it never happened. So it clearly wasn't meant to. That would have been different. Leonard Cohen would have been different. Prince would have been different, and they're all dead. So not to make light of that, but
They're in Elysium.
right, exactly. I mean, if Machine Gun Kelly gave me a ring, I wouldn't be starstruck.
So keeping it more in a professionalism thing. And obviously, there aren't very long hours working in a studio and anything, but what do you think was possibly the most longest time you've ever spent in a studio?
Longest time I ever spent in the studio. Well, I worked a lot all my life, so I couldn't say. I mean, I've done whole full days from 9 a.m. to 9 a.m., 24-hour clock studio work, because I've had, since I moved to, well, since London actually. When I was in London, I bought a place in East London, and I had my studio at home, so I was in my studio, so I was always working. So I could say it's 3-4 months of just being in the studio and then going out to tour. So I've been working constantly for a very, very long time. I mean, if it was if you're talking about booking a studio, going to it and spending time in it, it's easily 12 to 18 hours. I mean, I'm at home in the studio. I've done my 10,000 hours. I'd say I'm pretty good at manipulating sound at this point.
It's just, and the thing about music is there's so many sounds, like you said, what you're saying, obviously in new wave, synth wave, electro, there's such a, a riveting sound, very, flowy, very, and everything. And when you've got a good sound, uh, there's the gleam and there's the smirk, but obviously there's been tons because you've worked a lot and everything, but has there been a particular time you heard that sound and you were like, no, go back, that sound works for this song, and being like, you've been very adamant about it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I write songs from a sound. I mean, that's that. If I play around with a synth, because I have multiple synths. I have 7 on display currently that you can't see. Do you want to see them? You want to see my studio setup? So,
Please. I'd be gratified. Very grateful.
So I have a whole bunch of synths, and if I were to take a synth and I messing around, I find a sound, I'll play with that sound, I'll hit record, and that will maybe engender an entire song just from the context of the sound. I mean, when I was in London and first moved to London, I just had an acoustic guitar and I was just writing everything on that. But now sounds are very important, because I feel there's a lot of songs, and if you want to call them songs, in the pop chart, which it's just a sound and a beat, and then everything else is somebody saying something over it, which to me doesn't connect, but to millions of people it does. Like, what I would say recently, sonically, there's been a resurgence on that whole new wave electronic thing. Like, since The Weeknd did that song Blinding Lights, it's come a little bit more round, hasn't it? And I like that song. I think it's brilliant, and it's mainstream.
I do think some songs with just sound work, and they don't always need words or vocalization as well. It's like, if you've ever listened to, I'm sure you have, all the Ministry of Sound albums, the music speaks for itself. Obviously, like you said, you can hear like random words or noises in them, especially in the club life. I mean, I bet, have you ever gone to one of those clubs when you're in London, or when you were in London, or when you're in California, depends what part you're in, and they play your music in a nightclub or something? That must have been interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was a DJ for a very long time, so the band that I used to be in, we had a lot of success in the clubs. We were on the forefront of the electro clash world, so there was a lot of interest. You know, we played in a lot of clubs, and we were played in a lot of clubs. And of course, I DJ'd, and then my own music. Obviously, I used to run a couple of clubs in LA, and I would play my own music, and other people would play it. So yeah, it's great. It's a wonderful feeling. I have a funny story from my band years and years and years and years ago, when I was still in London, and we went on tour in Spain. This is when I was about 22, and somebody was playing a song at the club we arrived at in Spain. I think it was in Madrid or somewhere like that. And I heard
Was
the
it called
song.
Pasha?
I'm sorry?
Was the club called Pasha? Because that's a famous club in Spain, that is.
No, we played Manumission in Ibiza with my old band.
Oh, okay.
No, this is a rock club we went into. So somebody was playing
Oh.
a rock song that I did. I mean, I'm a rock artist essentially, and they were playing a song, and I was like, "This is the best Suede song. What Suede song is this?" And it was us, and I couldn't recognize it. I used to take a lot of drugs.
Well, that's kind of part of the music world. I mean, not everyone does, but you know, to live a life of musician can go this way or that way, and we all must have experience, for we're only human. But
Absolutely.
overwhelmment as well.
You have to have things to write about, right? I mean, I haven't touched a thing for a long time, but you know, the whole techno. I mean, I was into house. I mean, Orbital are one of my favorite bands of all time. I used to go to the Whirly gig in London, which was a really fabulous club. Like, it was very how I guess it was house, but it was electro house. So it was I mean, basically in those days, which was, you know, maybe the late 90s, it was the best thing to do. I mean, all the beautiful women were at the house clubs and all the electro clubs. So, you know, of course I would be there, although I didn't make music like that. It was only in 2001, I guess, when I had success, like real success in a more electronic world. And it was still rock. I mean, the Electro Clash was the sort of pivot between rock. It was like Primal Scream and bands like that were also huge in that
Yeah.
thing. So you've got your guitars, but you've also got that techno and electronic backbone. Now, I mean, my last record was it's a hybrid. I mean, there's not much electronic on that record, so.
And you know, I'm consider myself a rock guy as well. But like I said, what I'm ever listening to on or whenever my mood goes, That's why my playlist is always on random. But it's nice that music has such a variety. It's basically like a salad bar. You can have a bit of this, a bit of that, anything. But comparing to, you know, obviously, what's kind of the difference between, and this is all scenes, but comparing to the London scene and the California scene while living that life?
Oh, I mean, that's an era-based question, really. I mean, when I first arrived in London, it was, you know, Britpop, and then it turned into house, and then it turned into post Britpop, and then it turned into so it varied massively. I loved London. London, on the cusp of the millennium, 1999, was by far the greatest place I've ever been in my whole life. And then I became quite famous in London in 2003-ish, 2004. So, you know, I was having a whale of a time. It was wonderful. I mean, what comes with that is a lot, you know, as I say, a lot of the drugs and all that sort of stuff. But between 98 and 2005, London was the greatest place in the world. And coming to LA, it's a different thing altogether. The music is not a focus in LA the same way as it is in London, weirdly, because not a lot of successful bands start in LA. All the successful artists come to live in LA because it's a wonderful place to live with lots of money. But you don't really start. I mean, the 80s, of course, there was Guns N' Roses and all those bands. But when I moved, there were not a lot of bands that start out of LA. And I know loads of musicians who live here now, of course, but they don't play here as their hometown, if that makes sense. So the music scene here is more hip hop oriented. It's more sort of poolside DJ stuff, and it isn't. I do something very different to what's the norm here, and that makes it good for me to be here because I'm one of the only ones doing it. But does that answer that question? I'm not sure.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's very, you know, it's true. Like you said, you're you're a resident, you're a visitor, but you always love to stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. What's it like in Cardiff? I don't know. What sort of music is big?
Well, right now, it's important to just support your grassroots and your venues. I mean, a lot of, you know, in Cardiff, there's a lot, not just, you know, the whole rock and metal scene, but also, you know, the indie and the thing. But a lot of music needs to be supported, and so is its grassroots venues, because we're 3 years out of, or 2.5 years out of this pandemic and COVID and everything. And venues just need to, which they have been, feel alive again with all these unsigned or starting bands, or these bands have been around a while and toured, and they've just only got their album released after like 10 or 5 years of things. So it's very grassroots. You know, you just need to sometimes not be stuck in the past and stick with what the artists you hear on your radio thing. It's just nice to listen to something new. Even if it's not for you, pass it on to your friend that it is something for. I mean, there's so many I can list. I mean, a very, like I said, sound. Like I was at one gig, and this was after my regular job at a place called the Green Rooms in Treforest in South Wales, and all three acts, like they had a very similar sound but extremely different musically. So like you're hearing beats, you're hearing, really good noise, but there's different. Those bands were Dimethopsy. I'm really bad with my THs. Dimethopsy, who was also a DJ as well. Vanity Kills, and Pretty Addicted. And Pretty Addicted, obviously from London and everything. And their band, now it consists of just a singer and a drummer, but it used to consist of a singer and bassist and drum and everything. But they've got all these beats and everything they're doing live with the sound system, but the drummer is actually, playing drums and everything. And Vanity Kills, they're kind of like, they're primarily sort of like metal band, but they're not, because they've done covers of Prince and Somebody's Watching Me, and they had their own sort of sound flavor. And of course, Dimethopsy is like, it's what you just said, more musically, but with sounds over it. But these are great bands I highly recommend if they ever go to LA, as long as others I know. But primarily here, it's pretty much support your grassroots, kind of like, back in the 70s or the 60s, all these bands starting, and they just have these venues and this and this. I mean, thankfully, with the power of social media and YouTube now, they could sort of expose more. But way back then, it was definitely a bit harder, but there is still the reward at the end.
Yeah, it's hard in LA because if you want to go and see a band, you've got all the people, from all the bands like the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac. You can go down to a local bar and see the guy from Stray Cats and the guy from the Eagles and one of the keyboard players from Guns N' Roses playing. So as an original new band with no, hook in some ways, it's difficult to get started in that sense. I mean, I did originally get started and started playing around LA quite a lot and did quite well, but it's hard. It's harder than London or Cardiff or somewhere like that. In England, there's more of a culture of new live music. LA doesn't have that, and it is specifically LA because it does exist in Portland and Seattle and places like that. But LA's more of a. I mean, obviously, it's known for being a movie center, so there's lots of movie stuff, and there's a lot of television being done here, and lots of famous people. So I mean, it's a fascinating city. But you if you don't know it and you don't have friends here, it's hard to integrate because London or Cardiff, you go down the pub and you'll meet 50 people. You don't have that sort of heart to LA. It's all disparate little pockets of friends who go in cliques to visit places. It's a very different setup. So
Yeah. I mean, the bands I've mentioned and not mentioned that I've seen or know of or interviewed, I mean, the ones that are still sort of grassroots, I hope they really, just keep on touring, keep on going, no matter how stressful it makes. But also, my different question I'm asking now, obviously you're working in the West Coast and everything, but have you done any work in the East Coast?
I played in a lot in on the East
I
Coast,
meant,
yeah, New York.
I meant the other side, but okay.
I don't know what you mean. What are
I
you
meant
asking?
the other side of the studio, that's all, like producing and have you done that in the East Coast as well as in the West Coast?
I work predominantly out of my own studio, which is here in
Fair enough.
South Pasadena, California. I mean, people from all over the world. I'm working currently with David J. Bauhaus, Love and Rockets, and a Russian artist called Svetlana. Can't remember her second name, but so I work with people from all over the world. I mean, I did a remix for Wayne Hussey from The Mission, who lives in Brazil. That's how it works now. I mean, a lot of people don't pay for a studio and get together and jam. It's like my ethos of working is they send me stems and I work in my studio. I mean, that's the way things happen for me at the moment. And I'm sad about that a little bit because I love going out to a studio and having a sense of ceremony where everybody's in the same place at the same time doing the same
Yeah.
thing for the same reason. And that's a pity. I miss that. And I have a friend in New York who I've worked with actually in his studio, but only for, a couple of hours while I've been on tour kind of thing. And he's brilliant. He's brilliant. He's over in New York, which must be hard to maintain a studio in New York because the rent is really, really expensive.
It is. But back to the touring thing, as you said, was this obviously when touring, West Coast and East Coast as a performer as well, is it like obviously venues good or thing, but has there ever been a different feeling or a different sort of system when doing touring in the East Coast compared touring in the West Coast?
I don't really know what you mean. I mean, we do fly dates. We never really drive. So if we're playing, for example, we played in Williamsburg or in Manhattan properly. And what we'll do is we'll fly into JFK. No, actually, we fly into LaGuardia, sorry. And then we'll rent a van, drive into the city, stay the night, maybe drive out to, New Jersey or something, do another show, and then fly back home. So it's the same setup. I don't really understand the question, but it's the same
I
setup.
meant like, I think I just overthought my question, so never mind about that.
No worries. I mean, it's every place you play, particularly in America. America is many, many countries. People don't realize this. They haven't lived here. There are 7 different countries in America, theoretically,
Yeah.
where you have
Where,
the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, the West Coast, the Northwest, and then the whole of the sort of flyover areas. There are 7 different cultures. It's almost like there's a Germany, a France, a Spain, and English, but it's all connected by a common language, but divided by the cultural norms of those different areas. So if this helps your question at all, New York is incredibly different in attitude and feeling to Los Angeles, like incredibly different. There's no comparison.
obviously, you said you managed or did some nightclubs in California as well. Obviously, it's a business and got to work. You got to make sure this is all working, this is all fine, this is on point, that is on point. But was there ever one of your clubs that really stood out and felt like, oh, this? I'm sure they're all your favorites, but has there ever been one that's been like, oh, this is my baby?
Yeah, I mean, the first one I worked on, I was given Alan. Do you know who Alan McGee is? Creation Records. He signed Oasis and My Bloody Valentine and Primal Scream. Anyway, he was a big deal in the English music industry. He asked me to do his club in Los Angeles, so that was really fun. It was a weird thing to try and play Oasis songs to Californians because Oasis kind of fucked it up in America. didn't do the business they should have done, and it was Liam's fault. I could go into that, but I can't be bothered.
Respectfully, I'm not an Oasis fan, so it's okay.
Right.
Shoot
Well,
from the hip.
I'm not an Oasis fan. I dig them. I think they're really great, but it's not the sort of music I would normally play in a club. And when we were playing Oasis to Californians, it doesn't fit. Like they don't. California specifically doesn't go for that Northern English swagger style music. It just doesn't really translate over here. Even, you know, bands like, I'm a huge Suede fan, for example, and nobody knows who Suede are here. Manic Street Preachers and Suede just toured as a double headline, and the people who are into them are so into them, but nobody else knows who they are. And of course, you can't escape Manic Street Preachers, certainly, and Suede in the UK. When I was there, they were enormous, and they were so well respected, and they were fabulous, and we loved them, right? I mean, that was a thing when I was growing up.
I love Manics.
Oh, Manics are fabulous. I've spent time.
Nicky Wire is just on a whole nother level when, you know, he's this lovely, calm sort of thing, but there's such an enthusiasm. I mean, all of them, but, you know, I'm particularly fond of Nicky Wire.
Yeah, I mean, they're fabulous, and you know, they're hometown heroes, obviously, because they're from the Black Country, aren't they? Anyway, so they come over here and nobody gets it. Don't know why. Cannot really pinpoint why Suede, Manics, Oasis, Verve doesn't work on the west coast of America at all. So, you know, so when I'm doing a record currently with, as I say, Dave Stewart, and it sounds a bit like the Verve. It's another artist that I'm working with who's writing the songs, and I'm just producing and playing things. And it's kind of cool because he's a cool guy. He really knows what he's up to. And we're making this Verve sounding record with Dave Stewart, who's bringing that kind of like 90s pristine sound that he has. You know, it's not quite Eurythmics, but it's quite clean. And it's working really well. So I'm hoping that we can create a vanguard and sort of get people interested in that whole Verve thing again. Because I was a huge Verve fan, for example. And as I say, Suede and Manics. But yeah.
Well, I grew up in the... Sorry.
Go ahead. You grew up in when?
Well, I grew up in the 90s, so I kind of, you know, I mean, obviously I heard all the 80s stuff as well, but being raised in that decade of that generation and hearing, like, obviously now these days they have, I mean, for me, when you listen to a radio station back then, like Real Radio, and you hear mostly 80s or things, and now it's like, it's kind of weirdly nostalgic hearing 90s music.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like you said, you know, that's a very 90s sound. The Manic Street Preachers have their own 90s sound. Obviously, Oasis, not a fan, but they made their mark on the 90s. Or when you hear something like Spice Girls, it's just you know, 90s pop primarily had its very own sound and way.
Well, music has cycles. I mean, I think the reason it's a 20-year cycle generally. They say. And the reason we're getting 90s back is because all the parents remember it from when they were teens, right? So they're bringing it back, and their kids are exploring it. So it's a cycle like that. And now, you know, my music kind of has that 90s vibe. It's like late 80s, early 90s stuff. So I'm hoping that, you know, fingers crossed, people will dig it even more than they were before. But I feel, you know, we've lost some of the momentum and some of the excitement about music that used to be around that time. So people are hankering after it because, you know, we've got this situation where it's playlist based. So each artist gets one chance at the playlist and they get featured on the playlist, right? But when I bought my first, you know, Verve record, Storm in Heaven, no, sorry, my first Verve record was All in the Mind, the EP. And every single song and every single note. The first Suede EP I bought, The Drowners, every single note and the artwork and all this stuff, it's really exciting. And I played it over and over again, the whole thing. Nowadays, with playlists, you're cherry picking the greatest stuff by every single artist that ever existed. So there's not the opportunity in the same way for new artists to sort of rise head and shoulders above. And even if I'm watching my habits change here, where if I hear a song that I really like, there's what's her name? Lola Young. Have you heard of Lola Young? Or Ren, for example. You know Ren? You haven't heard of Ren? Okay. So there's a song by
Sorry.
an artist called Ren, called Hi Ren, and he's from Bristol. Sorry, not Bristol.
Somerset?
Brighton. He's from
Oh, right.
Brighton. And it's the first song in a million years, I feel, since TV on the Radio, which is a long time ago, where I heard his song, Hi Ren, and I was just like, wow, I have to listen to this guy. And I listened to all of his stuff. But mostly when I hear a playlist, it's so rare that I hear something that is so head and shoulders above that I go and I check out all their stuff. I might like that one song, but because I'm not getting the chance to listen, it's like I don't understand where that thing went. Where when I heard a song, I wanted to listen to everything the artist did. And I think it's because it's on this phone and the artwork is tiny and I don't know who's doing what on the thing. Because when I used to come home with a 12-inch single, I used to sit with it and I used to look at the artwork and I used to go, this is really cool. And I'd flip it over and I'd know who the producer was, where they recorded it. Whereas now I hear a song on a playlist and it doesn't make any difference. I'm not invested at all. Like the physicality, the tactile nature of how music was ingested by kids when I was growing up doesn't exist anymore. So it's a real pity. It's like I make an album for me that is deliberately designed to sit down and inhabit the world of what I am trying to say in the order that I am trying to say it. And I take a lot of time about that process. I'm like, okay, this song goes first, this song goes next. This is a trajectory of emotion. This is a narrative story of what I'm trying to tell. And then one of my songs get used in the playlist, and that's the biggest song I've ever done. And it's not representative in any sense of what I'm trying to say, which can be frustrating because, you know, I hanker after those days when The Wall by Pink Floyd was this gigantic thing, and it was
Yeah.
it hit culture. It changed culture. The
The
Beatles
hammer.
changed culture. The
The
what?
hammers in that, you know? Or that's what I mostly remember.
Yeah,
I remember the hammers.
and it has this resonance to you that doesn't exist when you hear the new Taylor Swift song on a playlist. Do you understand what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I miss that.
Well, countering that, missed that, I'm kind of reliving nostalgia, courtesy of my wife, because I just got back into a band I remember from the 90s who were out touring again, and I was like, oh my God, it was these people. And I totally forgot about them, and I sort of re-fell in love with them, and that's a band called Space.
Oh yeah, yeah. The female of the species.
Yes, female of the species, and you know, just to see them, I've seen them like 3 times now, and to see them play that live, obviously different times in a different way, but nevertheless magical. But to revisit an old sound in a way is also poetic as well, and to get back into something that I regrettably I forgot. But as I said, I was a kid, and it's just amazing. I mean, obviously that all happens with music. It's like, oh, I haven't heard this for so long, but yeah, it's just nice to. But yeah, when I listen to current music, I try so hard, like when listening to on the radio, you know, even something that is not I'm not into. I just try, you know, go, oh, okay, because obviously, I think everyone deserves a shot.
Sure,
You know,
sure.
sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, there is sort of like I feel like in every decade, the sound stays in the decade. Obviously, people resurrect it or bring it back or you know, figure everything. But you definitely know that's a 90s sound, that's an 80s sound, that's a 50s sound and
Mhm.
everything. And then it's sometimes amalgamated with other sounds. But there is just a very fascinating thing about sound. It's like when you hear Rhythm of the Night, you know, this is the rhythm of the night, which has been recovered as well.
Mhm.
But the original is like, yeah, that's 80s. Or when you listen to, you know, 70s Blondie compared to 80s Blondie, it's like yeah, I mean, it's still Debbie Harry and everything, but you can tell, like, or Bowie, for example. Like, when I listen to, here's a great Bowie song, and it's very 90s, Little Wonder.
Mm.
Little Wonder is like, that's got like a mixture of sounds. That's very late 90s, early 2000s, that sort of sound, kind of matrixy, is how I would describe it. But Little Wonder, that's, yeah, you could definitely tell it's, oh, that was that decade. I hope I didn't ramble about that too much.
That was the era I met Bowie. I was very I loved the Earthling album. Thought it was really really good, and people were quite disparaging of it because they felt like he was following the trend. But I love it. It's great songwriting, and you know, all
I
right,
think he
he's
was,
using producers that may have been a bit behind the curve, but the songwriting was fabulous, and I really enjoyed it. So
yeah, I think he was just being what he always is, an evolutionary chameleon, as I like to describe it, because he was either this person, whether he was Ziggy Stardust or whether he was, Jareth the Goblin King and everything. There was like, this one person, but of a array of personalities and styles and everything, and that's, I just think, personally makes him great. And I think, what you've been talking about musically, like you've been doing this, both as performer and producer, it's just been utterly fascinating. So it's been, God, I must say, this episode's been very philosophical.
well, I did do a degree in philosophy. That was my university studies. But yeah, I mean, I mean, music is philosophy. Music is love. Music is communication. And you know, philosophy was
Drug.
the only subject that they taught in university was philosophy for the first 1,000 years of universities existing. Because you know, there is only one question, and that is why are we here, and how do we make our tenure on the world tolerable? Because you know, life is full of hardships, and
Yeah.
all human thought, it goes towards that. It's like, how do you make things enjoyable? And I feel very committed to the idea that art and fashion and music and architecture is all that we have to separate us from, you know, nature red in tooth and claw. So I try to explore the best I can music, because that is where I planted my flag when I was 15 years old. I was like, this is what I'm doing, and I want to explore every aspect of it. I know that I'm not going to ever be able to do hip hop, and I know I'm not ever going to be able to do country music, but everything else is on the table as far as I'm concerned. I want to involve, you know, I want to play every instrument. I want to meet every person. I want to express joy and beauty, even in sadness, you know.
Then all I can say is my blessings and best of luck with that, because obviously there's the enthusiasm, there's the passion, the fire has not gone out. And I appreciate you being on this episode, and I'm wishing you the best of luck across the pond. And I hope you can return for future episodes, good sir.
That would be lovely. Can I plug the album? It's Forget That I'm 50,
Yes,
the
please.
Aladdin Sane cover record, featuring contributions from Gene Loves Jezebel, Human Drama, Darwin, all a whole bunch of people. And check out High Ren. If you haven't heard it yet, it is the one song that has blown my mind in 20 years. High Ren. I'm going to put it as a comment, because I really recommend it. You'll love it. It's Brighton-based artist who is just phenomenally amazing. High Ren. All right. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you for being on the show, and hope to have you again someday. But for now, best of luck to you, sir.
Thank you. Love it. Bye.
Good night.